to another episode of Cooking with Emily Rassam. Today we are making Easter bread. We will start out with 5 cups of flour, 1/4 cup of milk, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of anise seed, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, 1/2 cup of honey crystals, 4 tablespoons of butter, 1 teaspoon of honey, 1/4 cup of water, and 3 eggs. We're going to start out our recipe by mixing those 3 eggs well. Make sure you take your time and combine the eggs until they're one solid color. No distinction between egg whites and egg yolks. Then we will take our heated milk, or scalded as they call it, and place it in our bowl. When it's steaming, you know it's warm enough. But then add your honey crystals. You can also use a 1/2 cup of sugar instead as a substitute. Then we will add our salt. Place your anise seeds back on the side. We won't need those until later on. Then we will add our 4 tablespoons of butter. Make sure to cut this up a little bit before you mix it. It will save you a lot of trouble. I've slightly softened this so it's easier to mix by sitting it out at room temperature for about a 1/2 hour. You don't have to be too precise in how you cut it. Then we will mix these ingredients together. If you are using regular sugar, make sure you don't feel any crunchy particles down at the bottom. It will take quite a bit of mixing to combine this. Make sure you chop up the butter nicely. It'll be easier to mix. Once you finish mixing, it'll look something like this. Make sure to be persistent. You want to have this all combined thoroughly as much as possible. It is oil with a liquid, so it won't completely combine. Now we're ready to set this aside while we prepare the yeast mixture. For this, we're going to take our yeast, honey, and our lukewarm water. Make sure your water is lukewarm or it won't work as fast. Add your yeast to your honey and then pour in the lukewarm water. Make sure you take time and stir this thoroughly. You don't want to have any chunks by the time you are completed. Once your yeast is thoroughly mixed, let that rest until it becomes foamy. Then add to your butter, milk, and sugar combination. Make sure you get all of the yeast because that's what is going to help your bread to rise. You haven't added any other leavening agents such as baking soda or baking powder to this. Then start slowly incorporating the flour. Don't add it all in at one time. Do a few scoops here and there. I would say 1/3 of the bowl for the first go round would be good. Mix this until well combined. Prepare for plenty of mixing and kneading. This dough takes a lot of hands-on work. Legend has it that they call this Easter bread because you have to rise the bread twice, so it's risen again. That's a fun Easter joke for you. It'll get you through all of this mixing. You can also use a mixer for this on low. After your first batch of flour, you will add your well-beaten eggs to the mixture. Pour those in, make sure they're well combined, and start mixing again. This really does take a lot of patience, and there's a reason why it is a holiday food, something that's not made every day. It takes a lot of love, skill, and dedication to make Easter bread. Once you're done mixing, the dough will turn a yellow color. Add your anise seeds and start the kneading process. This dough is very kneady, so you will have to knead it for about 5 minutes. Take time to relax while you're doing this. My dough got a little sticky, so I added some extra flour to the outside. After it's well stuck together, you can start kneading it on a flat surface instead of in the bowl. You want to keep kneading this until it feels kind of elastic and looks well combined and well put together. As you can see in this part of the video, that there are some pieces that don't look like they're sticking together very well at this point. After about 5 minutes of kneading, your dough will look like this. Next step is to add some oil to a bowl and get it ready for proofing. Make sure you put oil all over the bowl so the bread doesn't stick. You want to be thorough in this process or it will be really difficult to remove your bread dough. Place your dough in the bowl and add some oil to the outside by rubbing it inside. Flip it a couple of times. You're going to want to cover the dough, and our family tradition is to put a cross in the top of it. And you must say Yada. Don't ask me why. Once the dough has risen, this will take up to 2.5 hours. Push it down. It should be about double in volume. Then you are going to start the process all over again. As this is Easter bread and it's going to rise again. After the second process of rising, that'll take about another hour. You can get your baking pan ready for baking. I decided to place mine in a bundt pan so it has that nice circle in the middle, and braid the bread dough, just so it looks extra festive for the holiday. Make sure again to grease your pan really well so it doesn't stick. Be thorough. So we'll notice that after the second time it has risen, it's just a little bit smaller than the first time. Add some flour to your surface and take your dough out of the bowl. Place it on your nicely lightly floured surface and cut into 3 approximately equal pieces. It's okay if it's not perfect. But if you are a perfectionist, feel free to weigh and make sure they're all the same. After your bread dough has been divided into 3 pieces, it's time to set 2 of them aside and start making the first one into a nice long roll. You're going to make this about the width of 2 or 3 fingers, depending on how much bread you are making. The original recipe calls for double of this, so it will make 2 whole loaves of bread. This one will just make 1. Perfect size for a party. You can squish the dough a little bit to get it started getting the right size. Give it a quick stretch from the ends even, and do some rolling as well. Be gentle with this, as you don't want any section to become too thin. It's okay if it's not quite the right length. At this point, you will figure it out as you go along. Next, start rolling the second piece. Try to make sure this is about the same size in length and thickness as your first piece. Keep them all pretty uniform and you will have nice, perfect looking bumps on the top of your Easter bread by the time the baking process is over. As you can see here in my video, this one was a little bit thinner. That is okay. Just try to keep them the same size for aesthetics. Since you're braiding them together, it's okay if they're not perfectly the same. Then start on your third piece. Do the same process with this one. Sometimes you have to squeeze it with your hands instead of rolling, depending on the size of your surface. Combine all 3 strands of bread and pinch them at the beginning. Do your standard 3-strand braid. It helps if you separate the strands of bread out to get a nice overlap. If one of the pieces isn't quite long enough, this is the good time to pull it and stretch it a little bit further, as you can see I'm doing in this part of the video. Pull and stretch and braid. You don't really have to pinch down the sides of this one because you're going to want to kind of measure it in your pan before you finalize the look. As you can see, I didn't quite make it big enough, so I will go in and stretch it a little bit from the sides. Once you have the dough fully stretched to fit inside your pan, it'll look something like this. You're going to let that rise again for about 10 to 15 minutes until it fills your pan nicely like so, and brush it with an egg wash. This will give it the nice sheen look when it comes out of the oven. It really does add a nice glossy finish and looks quite beautiful when you finish baking it. So brush it down pretty thoroughly with the egg wash. It should take less than a whole egg. And make sure to get into all of the nooks and crannies and the side of the pan. Once you finish egg washing, it is time to place that in the oven, 300 Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. Then increase the temperature to 325 Fahrenheit for another 20 to 25 minutes until golden brown. Then take time to enjoy with your family.